Well, hey everyone. On the podcast, I did an article in IEEE Spectrum about how, this idiot was saying, AI, it's fearmongering, everything. We're all going to die. Dogs and cats living together. We need government regulation because we can only trust those big, wonderful, beneficent corporations and our wonderful government to help us with that. We can't leave it to open source. He basically equated open source with unsecure. And yes, he kept saying unsecure instead of insecure. I guess that's like a newspeak term or something like that. So anyway, I thought I'd do this article that they published from the other side of things about how open source AI is good for all of us, but the current regulatory trends threaten to quash transparency and competition in AI. Let's get into it. And this is a story from Ben Brooks, who writes, "Since the launch of powerful open models like Llama, Falcon, Mistral, and Stable Diffusion, critics have pressed to keep other such genies in the bottle." And two senators wrote to Meta, saying, "Open source software and open data can be an extraordinary resource for furthering science, but centralized AI models can be more effectively updated and controlled to prevent and respond to abuse. Think tanks and closed source firms have called for AI development to be regulated like nuclear research, with restrictions on who can develop the most powerful AI models." And he mentions the other article I went over, that open source AI is uniquely dangerous, echoing calls for the registration and licensing of AI models. Down lower, he says, "My concern is that this grassroots ecosystem is uniquely vulnerable to mounting restrictions on who can develop and share models. Eventually, these regulations may lead to limits on fundamental research and collaboration in ways that erode this culture of open development, which made AI possible in the first place and helps make it safer. We wouldn't be where we are right now if it weren't for open source." And as usual, it's not government that has transparency. It's not big corporations that have transparency. We've seen that with Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, everything else. And he writes, "Open models play a vital role in helping to drive transparency and competition in AI. Over the coming years, generative AI will support creative, analytic, and scientific applications that go far beyond today's text and image generators. We'll see such applications as personalized tutors, if they start giving us the right information for once, desktop healthcare assistants, and backyard film studios." We're actually starting to see those. There's a lot of AI models out there that can really help small, indie, and individual filmmakers do a lot of amazing things. "These models will revolutionize essential services, reshape how we access information online, and transform our public and private institutions. In short, AI will become critical infrastructure. But the next wave of digital services should not rely solely on a few black box systems operated by a cluster of big tech firms that none of us can get into, none of us can understand, none of us can really see what's going on, and the only way we can use it is with government or some corporation breathing down our neck and watching everything we do." Yeah. I don't know about anyone else, but I don't work well with someone just constantly looking over my shoulder. I mean, if it's a boss or something, or a client or someone I'm doing, work for, okay, fine. They're the ones paying me, so they get to do that. But no, you don't just get to walk in and say, "What you doing?" and just look over my shoulder while I'm working. No, none of your business. Go away. Today, our digital economy runs on opaque systems that feed us content, control our access to information, determine our exposure to advertising, and mediate our online interactions. We're unable to inspect these systems or build competitive alternatives. Everyone, please remember, YouTube was started by 3 people in a garage. Look how much it took them to create Rumble. They had to go through a lot to do that. Amazon just started as a small online bookseller. All of these other big tech firms got to start off created in someone's garage. Apple, created by 2 guys in a garage. Now they're $1 trillion company. And what have they done? They've stopped the rest of us from having the same opportunities that they have. It says, if models, our AI building blocks, are owned by a handful of firms, we risk repeating what played out with the internet. The internet was supposed to be open. Everyone remember that? Everything on the internet was supposed to be open? Yeah. If you remember, I covered, even Tim Berners-Lee ended up going against that. Going against his own principles, the man who invented the web, to be open and available to all. Stabbed us all in the back. All right, so open models play a vital role. If a model's weights are released, researchers, developers, and authorities can look under the hood of these engines to understand their suitability and migrate their vulnerabilities before deploying them in real-world tools. It's sort of like the videos I was making last week when we were talking about diversity and how they were like weighing certain things too high with certain prompts or things like that. And I mentioned there were other models you could download that didn't do that, because everyone can just play around with the weights in these open models and just customize it to their needs. Everyday developers and small businesses can adapt these open models to create new AI applications, tune safer AI models for specific tasks, train more representative AI models for diverse communities like what we were talking about, or launch new AI ventures without spending tens of millions of dollars to build a model from scratch. We know from experience that transparency and competition are the foundation for a thriving digital ecosystem. That's why open source software like Android powers most of the world's smartphones, and why Linux can be found in data centers, nuclear submarines, and SpaceX rockets. Brian Lunduke has a video, maybe I'll grab the link and put it below, called Linux is Weird. All sorts of weird places you'll find Linux. Like that world record sniper shot from years back where the guy made the shot from like 2.2 miles away. He was using a computerized scope that was running Linux. And it was stuff like Linux runs on milking machines, all sorts of things. Open source software has contributed as much as $8.8 trillion in value globally. That's 8 apples. More than 8 apples. Indeed, recent breakthroughs in AI were only possible because of open source research like the Transformer architecture, open code libraries like PyTorch, and open collaboration from researchers and developers around the world. And now they want to do regulatory capture and gobble it all up for themselves and screw you and screw the little guy. The EU and US regulations could put the brakes on this culture of open development in AI. For the first time, these instruments establish a legal threshold beyond which models will be deemed dual use or systemic risk, another little, meaningless buzzword. These thresholds are based on a range of factors, including the computing power used to train the model. Models over the threshold will attract new regulatory controls, such as notifying authorities of test results and maintaining exhaustive research and development records, and they will lose EU exemptions for open source development. This is what politicians are talking about when they go, "We love small businesses. Obama did this crap." If you remember back in the Obama years, if you were a small business, you had less than 50 full-time employees. So, if you had more than that, well, then you were, but we love our small businesses, so we won't regulate you if you're less than that. Well, what happened? You can only grow to 49 employees. And so many businesses would grow to that length and then stop because the cost of hiring that 50th employee was just too great. Because it wasn't just then that you were regulated for that one employee that you hired, number 50. You're regulated for the other 49 as well. That's what they mean when they say they love small businesses. They want to keep them small, keep them down, keep them from growing like Amazon did, growing like Apple did, growing like YouTube did. They want to keep them down and keep them small so that they're not competing with their cronies. That's what they mean when they say they love small businesses. You got to stay small. You got to know your place. Stay in your place, you lowly small businesses. Don't you dare think that you get to grow big like these other ones did. That's what they mean. And we're talking about hurting everyday developers. Regulating upstream components like models could have a disproportionate chilling effect on research in downstream systems. Many of the restrictions for above the threshold models assume that developers are sophisticated firms with formal relationships to those who use their models. For example, the U.S. executive order requires developers to report on individuals who can access the model's weights and detail the steps taken to secure those weights. The EU legislation requires developers to conduct state-of-the-art evaluations and systematically monitor for incidents involving their models. Yet the AI ecosystem is more than a handful of corporate labs. It also includes countless developers, researchers, and creators who can freely access, refine, and share open models. They can iterate on powerful base models to create safer, less biased, or more reliable fine-tuned models that they release back to the community. If governments treat these everyday developers the same as the companies that first released the model, there will be problems. Developers operating from dorm rooms and dining tables won't be able to comply with the pre-market licensing and approval requirements that have been proposed in Congress, or the one-size-fits-all evaluation, mitigation, and documentation requirements initially drafted by the European Parliament. And they would never contribute to model development or any other kind of software development if they thought a senator might hold them liable for how downstream actors use or abuse their research. Individuals releasing new and improved models on GitHub shouldn't face the same compliance burden as OpenAI or Meta. Actually, I think they should face the same compliance burden, which is none. Stay out of it, government. Government, you need to know your place, government. That's what it is. You have a place. Your place is called the Constitution. And the Constitution says that you only get to do a certain limited number of things in Article 1, Section 8, and this isn't one of them. And all of you swore an oath. All of you grabbed the Bibles that you, pay so much lip service and pretend to believe in, and you smear your greasy hand all over it, and you raise your other hand. And with all the lies that come spittling out of your mouth, spraying everywhere, you swear an oath to support the Constitution. And then you do crap like this. The Constitution does not give you any such power to say what kind of math we can do in our own homes on our own devices. And that's exactly what this is. Exactly. There is still no framework for determining whether these models actually pose a serious and unmitigated risk of catastrophic misuse, or for measuring the impact of these rules on AI innovation. The preliminary U.S. threshold, 10 to the 26 flops in training computation, first appeared as a passing footnote in a research paper. That's what they do. That was a whole, like you go on the TSA, oh, you can only have a bottle with 3.5 ounces of liquid. That was, I think it was a couple of high school kids just kind of did this thing and they grabbed it and ran with it. Now they're grabbing and running with a footnote. It's what they do. Any little excuse that they can grab, that's what they do. The EU threshold of 10 to the 25 flops is an order of magnitude more conservative and didn't appear at all until the final month of negotiation. We may cross that threshold in the foreseeable future. What's more, both governments reserve the right to move these goalposts for any reason, potentially bringing into scope a massive number of smaller but increasingly powerful models, many of which can be run locally on laptops or smartphones. Because they're getting smaller, they're getting more efficient as our devices get more powerful. So yeah, before too long, you'll be able to have an engine of AI creativity in your own pocket. And they don't like that. They don't like that you have that power. They don't like that you have that power over your own life. Online safety, election disinformation, smart malware, and fraud. Some of the most immediate and tangible risks posed by generative AI. Economic disruption is possible too. That always happens with new technology. However, these risks are rarely invoked to justify pre-market controls for other helpful software technologies with dual-use applications. Photoshop, Word, Facebook, Google Search, and WhatsApp have contributed to the proliferation of deepfakes, fake news, and phishing scams. But our first instinct isn't to regulate their underlying C++ or Java libraries. No one said we had to regulate C because it could be used to write malware. Instead, critics have focused on existential risk. We're all going to die. That's what they have to do. To make the case for regulating model development and distribution, citing the prospect of runaway agents or home-built weapons of mass destruction. That's what they have to do. They have to look at it and find, just imagine the possible, worst case scenario that could happen from that. But the weakness of evidence is striking. If these arguments are to justify a radical departure from our conventional approach to regulating technology, the standard of proof should be higher than speculation. And that's all they have, speculation, fearmongering. But that's all they always have, isn't it? When they go screeching about how they need to regulate this and regulate that to protect you. In many ways, models are regulated already, thanks to a complex patchwork of legal frameworks that governs the development and deployment of any new technology. Where there are gaps in existing law, such as U.S. federal law governing abuse, fraudulent, or political deepfakes, they can and should be closed. I've talked about this before. Just recognize bodily autonomy. You own yourself. And so if someone tries to do a deepfake or whatever, with certain exceptions such as parody or whatever, but if they're trying to pretend that it's actually you saying and doing these things, and that's causing you damage, well, you should get to sue them, right? However, presumptive restrictions on model development should be the option of last resort. We should regulate for emerging risks while preserving the culture of open development that made these breakthroughs possible in the first place, and that drives transparency and competition in AI. Yet the worst thing you can do to an emerging technology is regulate it. It's the last thing it's the most harmful thing you could possibly do, not only to the technology, but to the people as well. And the only reason to do it is the betterment and the enrichment and the empowerment of the political class, of the ruling class. That's just one more jackboot that they can put on and grind you underneath it. That's all it's ever been about, so please don't be fooled by it. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And as always, donate.bogosity.tv. The more independent money I can get in, absent of having to rely on YouTube ads, which is less and less, the more I can do this, the more freedom I can have to do this, and the more options I can have with that. And there you can donate with PayPal and Venmo. You can also get a little bit of extra freedom by donating with cryptocurrency so that the banks don't pull out their shares, the government's not breathing down your neck. Nice, private, open source options. And also, of course, Patreon and Subscribestar, where you can become a regular supporter, get these videos early and ad-free. Thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.